Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. I'm Vanessa, your webinar organizer, and my role today is just to ensure that everything runs smoothly. Today's presenter is Dave Stent. Dave is a business partner with McQuaig Psychometric System, and he'll be talking about the 5 secrets of recruitment. Please do feel free to submit questions during the live session using the question window in your control panel. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can during the session, or Dave and I will follow up with individuals after the event. Just to let you know, the webinar will be recorded today, and I'll email everyone a link where you can find the recording and the slideshow. Okay, that's about it from me. So Dave, over to you.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, and welcome everyone. First of all, thank you for giving me 30 minutes of your valuable time today. In this webinar, we will identify the 5 secrets to unlock a successful interview and, of course, ultimately make the right selection. We're going to identify key activities and strategies at each phase of the recruitment or interview process. What I've got for you today in the way of takeaways is we'll look at the difference between high and low performers. I'll do a secrets countdown for you from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And then, of course, if you've got any questions, we'll process those and get back to you after this webinar. The 5 secrets I'm going to talk about today all come from the effective interviews and selection workshop run by Holst on behalf of McQuaig. I have recently had the pleasure of running several of these effective interviews and selection workshops. These 5 secrets are the ones that get consistently highlighted as light bulb moments for the delegates. And what I'd like to do just before we move on is conduct a quick poll, if I may. You'll get an invite to complete the poll, a few seconds to complete it, and I will then move on. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. For those of you who have been on the workshop, can I say it's good to have you back, and I hope today will be a good refresher for you. For those of you who've done other interview workshops, I'm sure you can be able to link back to some of the key elements of your workshop to some of the secrets I'm going to talk about today. And of course, finally, to those of you who have not experienced an interview workshop, well, hopefully I'll be seeing you soon on an interviewing workshop run by Holst. Thank you, everyone. Well, to get us underway, let me just ask you to have a think about someone you work with you would consider a high performer in the job. And of course, if you had more like them, your company would be a great place and a successful place to work for. So what is it that makes them different from the rest of the pack? What is it that differentiates high performers from low performers? Research by the McQuaig Institute highlights the 6 key characteristics of high performers. And we can see that these 6 characteristics form the framework to the structure of successful interviews. It is important for a successful outcome that the key behavioural stars are identified prior to the interview and that we then consistently use them throughout the interview. But of course, it's the way in which we conduct the interview that's just as important as to what it is we're trying to discover. And what I'll do during the next 20 to 30 minutes is reveal the secrets behind a successful interview. And during that time, I'll also introduce you to some do's and don'ts associated to each secret. So you may well want to have a pencil and paper handy to capture these do's and don'ts. What is it you need to do to turn yourself into a brilliant interviewer? In a way, it's quite simple. It's critical that you give the time to prepare. Not only preparing the materials for the interview, but preparing yourself mentally. And for me, that links back to Stephen Covey's effective habits of successful people. And the one I'm thinking of here is be proactive. I mean, after all, you wouldn't dream of going in to see a customer or a potential new client without full preparation. Why would you not properly prepare to ensure you find the right person for your company in that case? In following the 5 secrets, you will have a roadmap to ensure your preparation has structure. Okay, let's get started. The starting point is to make sure we engage with the candidate as quickly as possible. And I can hear you saying out there is, what's in it for me? Well, quite simply, you want to find the right candidate. You want everyone to have the chance to perform to the best of their ability. And of course, the follow-up question to that is, well, why? Well, the quicker the candidate can feel involved and encouraged to participate, the more open and focused are going to be their responses. What's the benefit to you as an interviewer? You'll get a real sense of whether the candidate is the right one for you. They will disclose more, and hence you can collect pragmatic evidence as to their suitability for the job. For me, it's not just as simple as asking the standard old, how was your journey, etc., etc. It's about taking the opportunity to find something in the candidate's history that will enable me to engage with the candidate, and engage right from the start by showing an interest in something they are clearly motivated towards. And it also ensures that I prepare. But don't get distracted by this subject and obviously the candidate's enthusiasm for it, especially if it's a favourite topic of yours. How can we do this? Well, by reviewing the candidate's CV. And in the 21st century, of course, looking at their LinkedIn page. Or even, dare I say it softly, their Facebook pages. We can identify, and we're looking for a non-work activity preferably, something that we can ask the candidate about at the start of the 1 hour. This encourages the candidate to settle into the interview, and it also recognises them for something they are naturally motivated towards. And I'd now just like to summarise this by passing on a couple of do's and don'ts for you. So, do you have those pencils and papers ready? Right, let's go. Please ensure the candidate is made welcome, and I mean from the very moment they enter the premises, from reception onwards. There is actually an argument that says the candidate should feel welcome right from the very start of reading the advert and applying for the job. Do create a professional, but also an encouraging atmosphere from the very first moment of the interview. And I have to say, wandering around Tesco's and going in the cafe bars, etc., I've seen lots of what looks like one-to-ones for me and interviews for me taking place. Please don't fall into that. Hold the interview. Don't hold that interview in a public place. Don't hold that interview in a noisy place. And also, this is not about trying to catch the candidate out. This is not about setting traps for them to fall into. It's not about digging them holes and then piling in on top of them. It's about a successful interview. It's not about confrontation. It's about facilitation. Here's secret number 4. As we develop the interview, our aim is to gather as much objective evidence from the candidates as possible. This requires consistent questioning aimed at drawing out focused evidence from their personal history. What's in it for you? Well, by consistent questioning, you will ensure every candidate is given an equal and fair chance to provide evidence of their performance, and their performance in those critical areas that you've identified as vital for success in the job. Put quite simply, you will compare apples to apples. And in the process, of course, select the right apple. Why is this important? Well, firstly, from a legal perspective, it is vital you can demonstrate, if it ever came to it, that there has been a fair and equal set of interviews having taken place. And by following a route map, a definite structure will also enable you to eliminate any personal subjective bias, because you'll be ensuring this consistent objectivity throughout the process. I have to say I can easily recall times when I've conducted several interviews on the same day. I felt the day had gone really, really well for me, but when I sat down and started comparing like for like against the candidates, I realised that because I hadn't had this route map, the comparisons were soon becoming subjective. So how? We need to draw out the candidate's history. We would like to spend 80% of our time focusing on their work history, since we plan to have them working for us. But also we'd like to augment that information with related examples of behaviours from education and from outside activities. The benefit in this approach is that, for example, if we are trying to probe the candidate's capacity to learn new things, because that's what we're looking for in the job, it's a new job and we need them to get up to speed quickly, we could find out what subjects he had difficulty with in university. a learning environment, and which ones came naturally to them. It gives us, as the interviewer, a wider area for exploration and enables us to get outside the box and challenge those well-prepared stock responses from the candidate. So in summary, some do's and don'ts for you. Do have a template, create a template. If there isn't one in place, work with HR to develop one. This template will enable you to take control of the interview. Don't get distracted by the candidate and the candidate storytelling. And to enable you not to do that, please do not vary from the template. Let's move on to secret number 3. Fine-tuning your question. Remember, our aim is to get behind the story told in the first instance. We need to identify the message between the lines, if you like. To do that, we need to fine-tune the candidate's response. And we do that by simply fine-tuning our questions. So how can we do this? 4 strategies for you. Focus, timeline, critical incidents, and contrary evidence. By focus, I mean get the candidate to focus on specific points of time in the past. And questions like, tell me about a time when you did X, Y, Z, is a way of focusing the candidate. The more similar a situation to the job in question, the more accurately it will predict this future performance. Build into the focus a timeline. And what you're trying to aim for is the more recent the situation, the more accurately it will predict performance in the near future. Look for patterns of behavior, because we know patterns will continue. With the candidate, give them direction, give them a timeline, give them this focus, using such phrases as, in your last job at ABC company. So we have the focus, the timeline. We now need to move into critical incidents. I have to say, too often in interviews, I see interviewers ask questions without any qualification to the required answer. And what do I mean by this? Let's say, for example, if I was to ask Tom, a candidate I'm interviewing, for an example of how he handled a customer problem, he may give me an example of a simple problem that he handles a dozen times daily. This tells me very little. But what do I know about high performers? I know that high performers are very good at dealing with the critical incidents. So what I need to do now is just by making a simple addition of one word or a slight rephrasing of the question, aim for that critical incident. So going back, I could put it something like, tell me about the most challenging assignment you had to resolve within this project you were running at ABC company. Or for example, at your last company, you had a team to manage. And that is something this job requires. What did you find most challenging about that part of the job? It's taking the incident and adding a critical element to it. And the fourth part of this rhythm, if you like, to fine-tuning your questions is contrary evidence. During the interview, we want to draw out a balanced picture of the strengths and development areas of the candidate. So questions like, what was the favourite part of your last job? Gives you an insight into what they love to do and their strengths. And secondly, what did you find most challenging? Clearly is pushing them into their development areas. Let me give you some do's and don'ts as a way of summary. Please do recognise that getting someone to think back in time is very challenging, and give them time to respond. Even perhaps rephrase the question. It's interesting when you watch someone going back in time and thinking about work that they've done, you can see much happening with their eyes. Do actively listen. This is about you listening, not talking. Summarize back a candidate's response. Be aware of your own body language and listening by doing things like checking for understanding. One of the traps you can easily fall into is assume the whole series of steps the candidate is going to take just because that's the way you do it. And the other thing to remember is the candidates are often better prepared than us. All you have to do, say after this session here, just go on the internet and type in interviews. You'll find that 99.999% for the items that come up are all related to how the interviewee, the candidate, can prepare well for the interview. Therefore, they're prepared well, you need to dig below the surface. You need to go for specifics that link directly back to the job you're recruiting them for. And don't please be impatient for a response. Because if you've got that question right, and you have a good question on the table, it will take time for the candidate to respond. Silence is your friend and not your enemy. And what I'd often do here is when I've asked a good question, I will mentally count in my head up to 10. Seems like a long time, but for the candidate, it's a quick period of time because they're trying to find and search back in their memory something they specifically did. Okay, secret number 2, the use of psychometric assessment. What I'd like to do here before I move on is just conduct another quick poll, please, about your use of psychometrics. Thanks once again, everyone. For those of you who are already McQuaig clients, many thanks for joining us today. And may I say thank you for being our clients and supporting us over the years. Much appreciated. To those of you using other systems, it's psychometric profiling that enables us to really dig deep into the interview and get below the surface. And I'm sure you make good use of your system. For those of you who are new to psychometrics and non-users, if after the end of this webinar today you have an interest in finding out more, please do contact us. We'd be only too pleased to talk to you. Now, from my perspective about psychometric testing, it's a tool I've been using for many years now, and I've used different types of psychometrics. And at times when I reflect back on my career, I wonder, how did I ever manage performance, etc., before I'd used them? I think I have to say, quite simply, not as effectively as I could have done. And what I love about a tool like the McQuaig system is it gives me a real focus for asking the right questions. Questions that enable me to identify the high performers. And these are the ones that can deal with the critical incidences. And isn't that what we're all after? I think the best way I can describe the value add of psychometrics is by referring to the 3 levels of assessment. And looking at these 3 levels of assessment, we can see that level 1 factors, such as appearance, manner, expressiveness, we need to consciously defend against. It's so easy for us to be attracted, if that's the right word, by a potential candidate by the way they look. Let me just ask you, stop judging outward appearances. Moving on to level 2, these factors are such as skills, knowledge and experience are all about what is in the CV. We all know just how much a CV can be flavoured. Another little word of warning in a way is sometimes we set our standards too high in this area, and in doing so we may well limit the recruitment pool responding to the advert. Because if we think about it, these level 2 factors can change. In many ways, level 2 is of less importance, especially when you can develop the skills and knowledge to do the job in a reasonable period of time once the candidate, who is now your employee, has joined you. Remember this, level 2 factors can be learned. And of course, it's the level 3 factors which always have the most impact on performance and potential. And this is an area where you do need to set your standards high. But do remember that not every characteristic from level 3 be of the same importance in the job. For me, I would recommend highlighting what you require in the first 12 months and look for those characteristics in the interview. You have to decide which are most important based upon the job requirements. So to summarize that, one of the things you definitely need to do is set a benchmark. You need to know what level 1, level 2, and most importantly, level 3 requirements are for the job. Remember, we are recruiting to fill a job, not take on an individual. Do use the interview questions in that psychometric report. They enable you to ask the right questions. And of course, if you ignore the benchmark, you won't be moving through level 1, level 2, level 3, and you will lose your route map. Other side of the coin, however, the psychometric profiling is only part of the jigsaw. So please don't make decisions solely on the results. Okay, let's go to secret number 1, to numero uno secret. This is the one that brings on most light bulbs in the effective interviews and selection workshop. And that is getting beyond the stock, well-rehearsed answer. We need to get below the surface, as it were. It's this going beyond the surface that will enable us to identify the right apples, correctly compare these right apples, and identify the right one for us. Just going slightly off track now, I've had the situation myself where, and it's not that far in the past, where I was looking for an L&D consultant to join my team. And it was a very technical role. And having recruited the person, and she had the level 2 requirements in abundance, within the first week we agreed to part company. And on her walking out the door, she said to me, "Well, thanks, Dave, for the opportunity, but do you know where you went wrong? You were looking for apples, Dave, and you know what? I'm a banana." I think you can just imagine my bewilderment with that comment. But you know what? I get it now. I just didn't probe far enough. I got allured by her level 2 attributes, for want of a better word. I simply hard on what was in the CV and level 2 needs. I didn't look for the fit into our company, the level 3 attributes. So I hired on level 2 and we ended up parting on level 3. So how do I explore behind the surface? Well, let me just pull up this oh so familiar iceberg diagram. And we can see the level 3 attributes are what are below the surface. And we've already identified that successful interviews, and of course us as successful interviewers, get below the surface during the interview. And if I reflect back now on the opening part of today's webinar, we saw that the difference between high and low performers were the 6 stars. It is the level 3 attributes that the stars reflect. These key elements form the focus for the interview. How is this done? By utilizing the tools available in the McQuaig system. Identify your level 3 requirements for the job. Use them consistently in the interview. To get below the surface, how can we do this? By building a rhythm and now a structure around the following. Get the candidate to explain what was the situation. Paint a picture of the situation. What led up to the situation? What was the opportunity? What was the problem specifically? What was the situation that identified a resolution was required? What was the need to implement the project? Well, it may even be something, why was the team member demotivated? What you're looking for here through open questions, good closed questions, etc., is get the facts and figures. For example, what was the company product line? How many team members were involved? It's those open questions, how, what, who, when, and why, that enable you to build that picture in your mind. And what you're building is a picture of the candidate doing the job. And of course, because you prepared well, you know what it is you require them to do in the job that you're hiring them for. So you need to be trying to overlay the 2 sets of actions. And you're also going to dig in and find out how they responded to different challenges. So in this process, be polite, please. Listen, but do challenge. Don't be afraid to interrupt. If you probe for all the details, it makes storytelling very difficult. So now that you have a picture of what the situation looks like, ask them for specific actions by asking them, what did you do? For example, if the candidate said, well, yes, I took that project on and I solved the problem, follow up by asking, what is it you actually did? Walk me through the actions you took to solve the problem. And often we'll get candidates saying to, especially in these days, they'll say what the team did. What you need to do is get the candidate to focus on their actions. Okay, very good, understand what the team did, but what did you do within the team to deliver the end result? And of course that links nicely now for the next point. You need to know what was the outcome of that particular exercise. It's important to close off the activity by asking the candidate, what was the result? We all know candidates can give us a great story. And for example, they could tell us how they designed and implemented a cost-saving strategy. If I don't ask that last question, I may well never know what the outcome was. So by asking, you know what, I could easily find out that it actually increased costs, because we never quite know how a great strategy was until we ask the candidate what the outcome was. There's an opportunity here because the outcome did not meet the individual's expectations, and I guess I could say, was it a failure? Our high performers would learn from it. So what did they learn from it? And what did they do differently, or what would they do differently next time that situation arose? And to complete this dive below the surface, a real good killer question to follow up from results. Who were you reporting to at that time? I think what we're doing here is we're sending the candidate a very clear message. I need you to be objective. I need you to be honest. Because in this process, I may well be checking up on you on your references. And you know what? If the candidate now starts to panic and says, oh no, the company's no longer in existence, you won't be able to do that, or the boss no longer works there, I think they've actually moved overseas, just sit back, think about it, because you may probably have just heard an embellished story. Do this early and keep the style going throughout the interview. This will not only signal to the candidates what you're after, but you will find you'll get more honest and concrete responses. And for you, it will enable you to remain objective and not let your thoughts wander. So in summary about getting below the surface, be prepared to challenge the response. Run with the roadmap, use the structures that will enable you to get below the surface. And do make sure the candidate answers the question. Even if you think you know where they're going to go with it, do not assume. Do not settle for that first answer. And if you find the candidate is talking in generalities and is not being able to dive below the surface, again, this may well be an embellished story. Just remember our fundamental principle here is that we need to be able to predict how the candidate will behave in the situations they're going to face when they join you, the job you're hiring for. So if you're looking for them to deal with multiple tasks, or dealing with upset customers, or meeting aggressive deadlines, these are the personal characteristics that you need to be looking for. And they are best measured by assessing past and if you can, most recent past performance. It's the best indicator of how they're going to act in the future. So what have we spent our time doing today in this webinar? First of all, we've established rapport. Number 5 is to establish rapport and get open communication. Secret number 4 is to get the rhythm and use the same questions with every candidate. You need to fine-tune your questions and dive down below the surface. You need to use psychometric assessment to give you a real insight to the high performers there. And I just mentioned just now, our number 1 and our primary aim is to get below that stock answer, to get below and understand the individual better. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and I'll now hand back to Vanessa for a final poll. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you to everyone for listening. So before we finish up today, I'd just like to take one final poll, which I'm just going to put on your screens now. This is just about finding out more information. So if you're new to McQuaig, we can offer you a free trial, or send you information about the dates of the interview and selection workshops. Or if you're an existing customer, just contact me if you want to know any more information. I think that's it. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. Thank you. So thank you very much for your responses. Just to let you know, we'll follow up with more individuals requesting information after the session finishes. So I will send a link to everybody tomorrow where you can find the recording and the slideshow. And I hope you've enjoyed the webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks again for attending.